Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Hi, I'm Alexandra Bolton. I'm the founder of Curgenven Wolfe and the former executive director for the Centre for Digital Britain. CDBB completed its mission in March this year. It was a partnership between the UK government and the University of Cambridge, bringing industry, academia and policy together. And it was home to the UK's BIM programme, the international BIM programme, and our national digital twin programme, transforming the built environment digitally for better quality of life for all. And I would like to share my slides with you. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about how finance and digital twins can shape a better future for us all. I'm going to talk about our vision for the built environment, why it's important, what do I mean by the built environment, a little bit about digital twins, connected digital twins, what we at CDBB learned over the 5 years of our programme, and how that connects with finance, how that connects with the benefits, and what are the takeaways that we would like to give you as financiers, as investors, as infrastructure owners, just as citizens. So back in 2021, which seems like a long time ago now, we got together 75 industry leaders in the UK and asked them, what is our vision for the built environment? We've been great about adding things, about thinking about what we want to do with our transport system or our housing stock, but we haven't thought about the built environment as a whole before. So we brought together these 75 industry leaders from 45 different organisations to think about what is it that the built environment is there to do? What is our vision for it? And we came up with that the built environment has an explicit purpose, which is to enable people and nature to flourish together for generations. We believe it's only when we shift our focus from creating the built environment, building more, to the outcomes that it enables, that we can have a world in which people and nature flourish for generations. And as Dan sort of alluded to, there are lots of complex interconnected systems, and the built and natural environments are some of them, and they are essential for our well-being. Improving outcomes for people depends on the services that these systems provide, not just the physical systems, and on coordinating the built environment as a whole, not just as its individual parts. So why do we do this now? Well, frankly, the built environment's too big to ignore. It's not just our buildings, it's not just our infrastructure, it's everything that we exist in. The greatest challenges of our time are systemic and interdependent. Whether you're talking about climate change, whether you're talking about global poverty, whether you're talking about the pandemic itself, they're all systemic and interdependent. And the pandemic has emphasized some really important realities for us, that well-being is crucial, that decisions we take now have long-term consequences, and I'm talking millennia. Change can happen really quickly though. We put our minds to it and we think about why we're making the decisions and how it's going to change things. We can make things happen quickly. And as we all know, we have to get more from less. We only have one planet, there is no planet B. So we need to get more from less. When you're talking about the built environment, some of the decisions we make, some of the things we build, some of the things we do last for millennia. If you start at the short end, some of our software, some of our apps, they upgrade almost daily. The mechanical components of our built environment change and are needed to be replaced on a sort of decadal cadence. So whether you're talking about aspects of lifts or the cladding outside your building, you're talking about decades. But our civil structures, our sewers, we still have Victorian sewers over here in the UK, our post-war tower blocks, these kind of things last for centuries. But more than that, if you look at Roman transport corridors, we're still using them today. So some of the decisions we make today will be around in 2,000, 3,000 years' time. So we need to make sure we make the right decisions. And this is why it's so important to make the right decisions. You look at all the people who have lived on the planet, it's about 100 billion. We've got about somewhere between 7.7 and 8 billion on the planet today. But if you look forward, you look at the next 50,000 years, it shows that the unborn generations, those that come after us, it's about 6.75 trillion. That's an enormous number. So we need to make sure we're making those decisions correctly today for all those people who will come after us. And there's a really nice quote from climate specialists, which says that what we do in the next 10 years, it will affect the next 10,000 years for humanity. And that's Professor CDBB. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what do I mean. I've talked about the built environment. What is it? Well, it's our economic infrastructure. It's our factories, it's our power system networks, it's our transport networks. It's the things that bring in money to our homes, our economies, our countries. But it's also the social infrastructure. It's the hospitals, it's the schools, it's the houses that we live in. And it's our natural infrastructure. It's the green spaces, it's the agriculture, it's the wide open spaces. And please, just because this drawing is of an urban environment, I'm talking about everything, the green around the urban environment. It's not just cities. This is what our built environment is. It's the interconnected system here. We put those three systems together, we get what I would call the built environment. Oh, let's go back on. We need to look at it, not just about what we're building, but how is that working? What systems, what processes are running within it? And this shows the time spent at various stages of the built environment's, or an asset in the built environment's life. And you can see that the planning, the design, the build, the commissioning, and the decommissioning are quite small. The huge amount of time spent on these things are in the use and operation and maintenance. So we need to make sure that we look at the through life effect of our built environment. To do that, we need good data. We need to make sure that we're looking at our assets that already exist, because we're only building about 0.5% every year. So if we don't look at the 99.5% that exists, we're missing the biggest way we can make a change. And we need to look at the services that our built and natural environment create to produce the outcomes that we need. We need that outcome for thriving, for people, for the planet. You can shorthand that to ESG goals if you like, but the bigger picture for me. But it's the services that connect the outcomes and the systems, the built environment and natural environment systems in which we live. So what's that got to do with data? Every single thing in our built environment is creating data. Some data we're harvesting, some data not yet. The people who move through the built environment are creating data. All that data can be uploaded to a cyber version of the built environment, where we can model, we can simulate, we can make decisions, and then we can put interventions back into the real world, the physical world. So the built environment isn't just that physical system I spoke about before, it's a cyber physical system. I'm going to talk a little bit about Digital Build Britain within that cyber physical system, and how we talk about data, how we think about data, how we use data. Because all that data that's being collected, we need to make sure it's the right data, it's given to the right people at the right time, and that the data's right. So before you even pick up your mouse or your pen to design something, even in the pre-design stage, you need to think about data right at the beginning, by default. Who needs it? How do they need it? What does it need to look like? What format? Who are you going to share it with? And make sure you've got security and resilience built in right at the beginning. Using best practice, making sure you've got that secure information management. We can make sure that we design thinking for the future. We can make decisions about not what we're building now, but what that building, that road, that transport system might be later. And when we're actually building it, we use our data to make sure that we've built what we've designed, to adjust where we haven't been able to build what we've designed, to be able to share across all those people working in that building environment, to make sure that the data they create is looked after, is collated. And doing that, we can exploit these new technologies we have to build faster, to build greener, and to build safer. Historically, we've been pretty good at the design and build stage, but there's been a tendency to hand over the data with the keys and then walk away. We need to make sure we are much, much better at that. So while we're managing the building, operating the building, maintaining the building, using that data from the design and build stage to make sure we know what we've got, and updating it when things change, using it to make decisions on things like predictive maintenance, to make sure that we have effective information management to transform the performance of our built environment and the services that it delivers. And then we need to integrate it. And this is on two levels. We need to integrate each individual asset into the wider ecosystem in which it sits. And we need to integrate it into people's lives, understanding how our built environment can improve people's quality of life, whether that's healthcare, whether it's the environment in which they live in, whether it's the way our social infrastructure runs. Using data to understand how our built environment is helping people or not helping people, and what decisions we can make to make that better. And at every stage of this design, build, operate, and integrate, we need to be passing the learning that we've got at that stage back to the initial stages. So next time we design something, we do it smart, we do it better, because we've learned. When I talk about the data that's created from the built environment, this is my data pyramid for explaining how we use it to make those better decisions for better outcomes. The data comes in the bottom, and we do some data management. We make sure that it's in the right place, in the right format, it's accessible by the right people, and it's secure. Then we need to make sense of that data. And as an example, financial models, predictive models, ESG frameworks. And then the bit that is really cool is you need to be taking decisions. That can be an automated decision, or it can be a decision that a person has a role in. So improving your ESG impact, reporting a carbon footprint, informing future infrastructure investments. And again, like the previous slide, every stage you send your learnings back to the previous stage, so that if you know what decisions you're taking, it might inform what data you want to collect more broadly. Let me talk a little bit about digital twins in case there are people out there who are confused about what a digital twin might be or have different opinions. So for us at CDBB, it's really quite simple. You have a physical asset, F1 car here, and as you know, those cars are completely censored up, as are the drivers, creating a huge amount of data, which is sent back to the pit and the models, and they get insights. They can make decisions, whether that is tweaking the fuel mix so the car goes faster, whether it's sending information on how the driver is, whether he or she is under pressure, whether he or she is relaxed, and then the interventions can come. They can be automated again, potentially like the fuel mix, or they can be manual. Come in, we need to change your tires, get off the softs, get on the mediums. That basically is a digital twin for us. It doesn't need to be super complex, although the F1s are, but if you have something where you have a physical, putting data into the cyber, where you're getting insights and decisions and interventions back into the real world, that for us is a digital twin. Here's another way of looking at it. Physical can be an asset, a system, or a process. I appreciate that sometimes you can't touch a process, but that will be the physical side of the digital twin. You manage your data, you make sense of it, you take the decisions, and you send the intervention back into the real world. So if you have a digital twin of a train carriage creating a lot of data, you've got your cyber digital twin interventions back into the real world. It could be about the heating system of the train carriage. It could be how the wheels are affecting the track. That's great. That's good. You could get insights, decisions. You can make that single carriage run better. But if you look at the system, the rail system, there are also signaling aspects that are creating their own little digital twin, creating data onto the cyber world, back into the physical world with the interventions. And the same with the track. How much more efficient is it if we can share the data that's happening in those three different aspects of the rail system? So the train knows that the track coming up is maybe overheated, they need to slow down, the signal's on red, it can tell in advance. This is a small connected digital twin. But let's move up the transport chain. Let's look at aviation, let's look at road transport, let's connect those, let's share data across those aspects and have an ecosystem of connected digital twins in transport. And let's not stop there. Transport is clearly linked with energy, particularly with EVs. Energy and water are very highly linked. In the UK, we're having floods at the moment, so the water and transport, there's quite a lot of linkage there. If we can share data securely and resiliently and appropriately between those different sectors, we can make much better decisions on that systems of systems basis. We can now have a connected ecosystem of digital twins, and that's what we would call a national digital twin. So, as I said, CDBB finished its mission at the end of March this year. What did we learn? We learned that a connected digital twin program at national level has to be outcome focused. It's got to be driven by purpose. It has to be systems based and values guided. And it must be socio-technical and community enabled. And I'm going to explain a little more about that later. The hyperlink on here is to the Gemini papers, which we published in March 2022. And it's our blueprint for the future. So please, if anybody's interested, download it. There's some really interesting work there please use it. That's what we put it out there for. So I've spoken about the vision that these industry leaders pulled together with the built environment with the explicit purpose to enable people and nature to flourish together for generations. Seems really simple, but we haven't articulated it like that before. So it allows us to understand the context in which everything we do within the built environment should sit. We need it to be purpose-driven. This is a slide of the climate resilient demonstrator that CDBB did. Again, it's on the website. Please feel free to have a look at it. We collaborated with a water company, a power company, and a communications company to see how the various decisions they made were connected in a flood scenario. And what we've shown is that without collaborating through digital twins, it will be incredibly difficult to tackle climate change. Because these are strongly interconnected systems and very complex systems in themselves, it's through things like connected digital twins, it's through sharing data, it's through using models that share data that we can make the interventions we have to make to solve the challenges of our day. Again, it's systems-based. We're talking about the system of systems, it's the built and natural environment, with the services providing the outcomes for people and nature. It's very important, I think, that we keep reminding ourselves that it's about a system. It's not about one individual aspect, one individual asset, one individual sector. It all is interconnected. And it's values guided. There's a move away from value to values. I actually think we can have both. This is the Gemini Principles. Again, please, there's a link. Feel free to download it. It's the ethical framework in which we think information management and connected digital twins must sit. So for us, it has to have a purpose, and that must be for the public good. It must have genuine public good in perpetuity. It must create value and performance improvement, and that is commercial value as well as public value. And it has to provide insights so that people can make the right decisions. We wrote this about the built environment, but the more we tested it, we realized that actually was applicable much, much more broadly. It's got to be trustworthy. And there's a real tension here because it needs to be secure and it needs to enable security. The quality of the data has to be high, or it has to be as high as is necessary for any given aspect. But it also needs to be open so that we can share. So you can see there's a tension there, but we need to have all these strings for it to function well. And it has to function. An ecosystem of connected digital twins is federated. It's not one monolithic digital twin of everything, it's federated. It has to be curated with clear ownership, governance and regulation, and it must evolve. Even 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined the advances that have happened in the digital transformation world. We know the pace of technology is relentless, so we have to be open to evolution and actively looking as to what are the next things. And it's socio-technical. It's very easy for those of us like me who are geeky engineers to get super excited about the tech, and it is super exciting. But unless we get the governance right, the ethics right, the legals right, unless we can upskill our people so they can use this technology, it will be this beautiful, shiny piece of kit that sits on a shelf and nobody uses. So it's a socio-technical change program to get a connected ecosystem of digital twins. This year in April, we published a paper, as it says on the tin, How Finance and Digital Twins Can Shape a Better Future for the Planet, with Mark Coates from Bentley Systems, who kindly sponsored the paper, and Peter Elhaj from KPMG. We spoke to a large number of financial institutions and spoke about what they were using digital twins for, what they wanted to use digital twins for, and how they thought that digital twins could help them in the future. The investors themselves have a huge amount of leverage in deciding what data is collected in the built environment, because they are funding it. So they can put in their contracts that they want specific data, specific ESG goals. The information flows from the environment through the companies all the way up to the investors, and the capitals from the investors back again. I think I'll go back to this one and just talk a little bit more, actually, because I think we've got time, about how ultimately most things that we measure come down to money. So money can be a really strong driver to get the future that we want for people and the planet. And the shorthand for that obviously is ESG goals. Digital twins and connected digital twins are tools that the finance community can use to create those outcomes as well as to measure those outcomes. And they're a means to an end rather than an end in themselves. So digital twins and connected digital twins de-risk investment. They allow better financial decision making, also better physical decision making. They provide better monitoring in both a financial sense and a physical sense of the assets. They allow investors to be able to buy and sell those assets much more quickly. And they allow ESG goals to be proven to have been achieved. Digital twins also create a lot of data, and we're finding the data in itself is valuable. Data that can be turned into information that can be made to make better decisions. As an example, one of the highways companies in the UK looked at their assets, and they found that if you divided their assets into thirds, 2/3 was their physical estate, the things that they physically owned, but 1/3 of it was the data and the cyber assets that they had. That's massive on a balance book, and it's even more incentive to have a digital twin, good information management practices, and connected digital twins. So the benefits of the built environment, I've talked about better decision making for people, profit, and the planet. We have benefits for society. Improved stakeholder engagement. You can go and you can see what's being built down your road, but you can also see how that might affect the bus routes, how that might affect your journey to work. It allows us to have better outcomes ultimately for the customers, us, the public, the taxpayers, the bill payers. And that gives improved satisfaction, improved experience, and actually leads to better outcomes for those people. They have a say in their schools, their hospitals. Those services can be adapted and adjusted to produce the best outcomes for that community. It has benefits to the economy. National productivity through higher performing and more resilient infrastructure, operating as a system of systems, less redundancy, less waste, less disconnection between the various aspects of the system. Improved measurements of your outcomes and better outcomes per whole life pound. And whole life pound is incredibly important, making sure that we're looking at the whole asset life cycle, not just the built bit in the first couple of years. And improved information and security, which thereby gives us improved personal, physical, and cyber security. Big benefits to business, new markets, new services, new business models, new entrants. For everybody from the investors through to the asset owners, through to the supply chain. We're seeing things like reduced insurance premiums, some reduced loan rates for asset owners who have a digital twin, who can show the data that's behind their asset, how that asset is working with the other assets in its ecosystem. And of course, we're seeing benefits to the environment. And that's really what I wanted to talk about. Having this digital twin uptake driven by the financiers, by the investors, allows us to fully measure ESG impact. It, of course, improves the building process. So you have less disruption, you have less waste, you can have better reuse. You know where your doors have come from, you know what's happened to them, you know whether you might be able to reuse them. But it also allows you to take that much bigger view and see how that one piece of infrastructure fits with the rest of the ecosystem, how it can play its part in reducing climate change, in producing better social outcomes. So the takeaways we have for the finance community were: adopt the Gemini principles. We found it to work way beyond the built environment. Adopt the Gemini principles when you're looking at your information management, your connected digital twins, your digital twins. To use digital twins to support ESG reporting, there's a lot of talk about greenwashing. But if you have a digital twin, you can prove what has happened. You can show the data. And you can then adjust to make a better outcome than the one that you have potentially. The open data unlocks value. And that might seem counterintuitive to people who have very commercial mindsets. but actually you can make better decisions if you share your data. That's not about giving everything away. It's not about giving your commercial raison d'etre away, but by sharing data, everybody makes better decisions, and it unlocks a huge amount of value, more than keeping your data locked in. We need to access and we need to upskill digital capabilities, that's clear. Lots of people of my generation have come up through their businesses with skills that they've taught themselves. We need to upskill ourselves, and we need to make sure that the next generation is digital by default, and I think a lot of them already are. We need to be able to provide that skill base. And most importantly is to collaborate. Collaborate with the infrastructure owners, collaborate with policymakers, collaborate with other financiers to make sure that we get the outcomes we want. It's about creating those outcomes. For the infrastructure community, one of the big takeaways for them is that the finance community can really help drive the adoption of digital twins in infrastructure. That digital twins are already starting to reduce the cost of funding and insurance for them. So the cost of a digital twin could easily be offset by the benefits in reduced funding costs and reduced insurance costs. That data has value, much more so if it's open and shared, and the decisions that that data allows us to make also have value. And finally, much like the infrastructure, like the financiers, collaborate. We need to work together. Unless we collaborate, unless we have a group that look about connecting, coordinating, convening, so we can collaborate, it will be much more difficult for us to tackle these challenges. So I popped up the slide with some links for the publications if anybody is interested. There are many more on the website, very welcome to download them and use them. And I'd be really happy to answer any questions if there are any questions out there.
Great, thanks Alexandra. Yes, we do have a couple questions. We do have a couple questions. Let me pull the first one up. So one of the questions is, what are the differences in management costs after the use of a digital twin?
What we're seeing, or what we're hearing empirically, and we don't yet have, I haven't seen a use case that shows this. Management costs specifically, we're finding that people are saying it's easier, they can see their data, they can see what's happening with their asset. But what we're hearing, and KPMG did a report back in 2021 with CDBB, is that for every pound spent on information management in the first instance, they make £6 of savings.
Wow.
And I'll drop a link in the chat to that particular paper. I didn't put it on my slide, and perhaps I should have done. And that's information management. When you move to digital twins, it will be really, there's some work being done there. But once you move to connected digital twins, my view is that 6 is going to be multiplied many times.
Really? Yeah, very interesting. Right on. Great. And if anybody does have any questions, please place them in the comments box, and we will get to them. So we've got another one from Stephen. How do you convince people to share the data? And that's a really good question.
I think you just show them how much better it is for them when the data is shared. So in the Credo demonstrator that I mentioned, the most difficult thing, maybe not the most, one of the very difficult things on that project was to get the data sharing agreement signed. So finding a form of words, a commercial form of words that everybody was comfortable with, was really difficult. And this is one of the discussions about this being socio-technical. But once it was done, they were able to see what was happening in the other sectors and how that would impact their own sector. Now, without sharing data, that wouldn't happen. So you wouldn't know that, as an example, if this bridge were to go down, that would mean that there would be a knock-on effect on your power system. So I think it's about cases. It's about showing people how you can do it securely. It is a little counterintuitive because we tend to think knowledge is power, and so therefore we should keep our data. But in this case, knowledge is much more if it's shared.
Yeah, and I agree, right? Knowledge shared is more powerful. Okay, we do have another question. Is there an increase in building contracts where a digital twin is part of the outcome?
Yes, I think there is. We're seeing more, many more contracts being digital by default.
Really?
And talking about digital twins, and I think they can be very simple or incredibly complex. And depending on what is needed, it needs to be specified appropriately. But we are seeing many more groups having a digital twin and putting that into that initial contract rather than as an afterthought later, which is brilliant, because it means that you can make the right decisions right at the beginning.
Right. Excellent. Okay. We've got a few more questions. So thank you for sticking with us. Is there a risk that the management matrix in a case of data breach? Right. So really around data breach and the security of data.
So this isn't my area of expertise. I'm not a security professional, but we in the UK work really closely with the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure to stop exactly those things. Obviously, there's always a concern about cybersecurity for things like this, and some security needs to be built in right at the beginning. But like most of these things, most of these sort of issues are humans making mistakes. It's people leaving their notes on the train. It's people sending an email to everybody, right, just one person. So we need to bear in mind that, yes, there are risks. Yes, we need to be thinking about security right at the beginning to make sure that we've got those risks mitigated. But we also need to remember that we need to think about security mindedness throughout the program, and that sometimes it's us making mistakes and rather than the technology that causes the problem.
Yeah, so doing an early risk analysis. How can data be integrated to collect non-geometric data during the construction works?
So I'm not sure I have the answer to that question, but I'm going to have a go. So non-geometric data. So I guess could be things like temperatures. It could be how people are moving through the site. There's been work done on that in various universities actually, which is now being used on construction sites. And data is data. If you have an environment, a common data environment where you can share it, it doesn't matter where it's come from. If it's in a format that is interoperable, it can be shared. It doesn't matter whether it's geometric or not.
Right, right. We've got another comment there from Lewis. A lot of data comes from suppliers. So much of the time they do need to go from paper-based documentation to a modernized data. I'm not sure what the question is there.
I wonder whether it's so we would say you need to be digital by default.
Right.
Having your documentation in a paper format, I'm sure that a lot of us have come to the situation where you walk in and there are just filing cabinets. You have no idea how to find your piece of paper that's got that particular drawing that you need. So by making it digital by default, by not having paper documents, by making sure that your information is stored in a proper information management system where you can access it, where it's interoperable, right from the start. It's not about translating between the two, it's about keeping everything in the digital.
So is the challenge there for people that are maybe not used to a digital collaboration platform, period, with sharing the data, is making that as simple as possible so Absolutely. They can easily contribute their data to the project?
Absolutely, and not everybody needs to provide the same level of data. So if you're talking about a building, for example, painter decorator only needs to know that there's a wall there and what color it needs to be painted. The electrician will need to know what's behind the wall, where the wiring's going, where the plumbing's going. So there are different levels of understanding and skill needed depending on what the role is. And upskilling is very much part of what needs to be done in the broader sense. We need to make sure that people have the appropriate skills to manage digital in the sense that they need for their profession.
So have you seen in the UK, given the digital transformation that has been promoted through the UK, have you seen positive adoption from trade, sub-trade, suppliers around sharing the data?
So we're very lucky in the UK in that the government mandated BIM in 2016. So since 2016, all public projects have had to comply to the international standards, now the ISO 19650 on BIM. So there's been a lot of opportunity to learn how to comply with BIM particularly, and with the broader digital transformation through to digital twins. It's a big industry with some very big firms and then lots of much smaller firms, and there's still work to support the training and the upskilling across all of the industry.
Yeah, right on. Excellent. Got another couple of comments here. The digital twin has to be maintained over time and kept current to reflect the real world. How much effort should one expect to maintain it versus creating a new model?
Really good question, actually. If you've designed your digital twin correctly, you should be expecting to maintain it, because you should be expecting that the twin will last as long as the asset. So if you've designed it correctly, it shouldn't be, it should be something that you've taken into account. And of course, it's going to take time, and we all know time is money, but the benefits it will give you to having an up-to-date, correct digital twin will, I think, far outweigh the cost.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Another question: don't you think that sharing the successful experience when data shared makes it a good reason for others to do so?
So yeah, I think the more case studies we have that show how things have worked really well, and the case studies that show how things have worked not so well, so we can learn from our mistakes, are really important.
I think that's equally important, right? To show people lessons learned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. How can we use digital twins to retrofit existing buildings where they may not have the design details available?
And with my picture of 99.5% of our infrastructure already existing, this is really pertinent. So there are some fantastic techniques for scanning existing buildings. We have some of the documents, not all of them, and one has to be pragmatic and build things up over time. You're never going to have an absolutely perfect digital twin on day one of an existing building, because there will be things that you will find out as built versus the design documents, even if you had all the design documents. So there's updating needing, in the same way you need to curate a brand new digital twin as time goes on. It will take a little time to get that perfect digital twin of a retrofitted asset.
Right on. Excellent. Okay, another question. If we could know the initial investment for transformation of traditional to digital twin per project / square foot platform, approximately how much would it be?
I don't have those numbers. I can tell you that for every pound invested, it's £6 of benefit. I would imagine it will depend very much on the project, because digital twins can be incredibly complex or incredibly simple. What's really important is to spec it appropriately, so you don't have, the platinum standard when actually all you need is just a run-of-the-mill version.
And I think the important aspect there is considering the overall cost of the project instead of certain aspects of it, to really consider that cost and the value of that, of implementing digital twin. Okay, a question from Tracy. Have you seen a lot of existing built assets being converted to digital twin replicas and transformed to twins?
What we've seen is a lot of big construction projects using digital twins. Some of them started before even the iPad and the iPhone existed, and they've started to, they started as soon as technology became available to create those digital digital twins, digital replicas, digital models. And it is now becoming something that's happening by default. When there are, it tends to need to be something to start the discussion about creating digital twin of an existing asset. So that will be maybe a refurbishment or something happening in the neighbourhood. But we are starting to see that happen.
Right on. Okay, last question from Dylan. Is there any mandate for the CDE use for the life cycle of digital twin?
So there's some ongoing work happening around a framework for information management. What does that look like at a top level? There's certainly, and it's technology agnostic. There obviously is the ISO 19650, which looks at digital transformation more broadly. But I don't think there's a specific mandate for the CDE, no.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Alexandra. That was a really informative presentation. We certainly appreciate your time presenting this to us.
Thank you.
Really enjoyable. Thanks again.